Christ!
Long weekend.
God has created it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, a podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature, grindhouse style, where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise. And at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon, we decide on the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes a month when we switch from bi-monthly to weekly shows this coming March. So for the full experience and the warm feeling inside of supporting us, we highly recommend becoming a fellow Sleazoid over at patreon.com/sleazoidspodcast. And that's your plug. That's the only plug you get. We're back for another show. 2 weeks ago was the last one where we talked
Kill
Bill and Female Prisoner, number 701.
Both fantastic.
Scorpion.
Yes.
The two probably best movies that we covered. The two I gave them both 5, so it was pretty nuts.
I was close with Prisoner, and honestly, on a couple more rewatches, maybe it will, because there's so much style in that movie. It's ridiculous.
So good. A little unfortunate. The day after we dropped that episode, news came out about specifically the production on Kill Bill.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, what timing. Fantastic.
Yep, so it was not a fun time for us.
No, because we were very...
we were a little
positive.
ashamed for like a few days there about what went down there, and although some details later came out that, made Tarantino look a little bit better in that light.
A little more forgivable.
It was a little bit of an oversight
nicer
on his part, especially to nearly kill one of his closest friends.
Yeah, a little bit of an oversight. We'll say that.
But he did seem, I guess, Uma declared that he was a little bit more apologetic about it, and that he actually did help release the footage, and he was in full support of everything that she was doing.
Yeah.
Either way, both were great films, and if you haven't listened to that episode, we highly recommend doing so. But this week, we have our first guest.
Exciting.
Yes. So, coming to us from the Bunta Vista Socialist Club podcast is Andrew. Andrew, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you guys?
Oh,
Good.
excellent.
Excited.
Very excited. Andrew has brought with him, from his native homeland of Australia, 2 Ozploitation films, or Aussie-sploitation films, which really don't have any sort of specific quality other than the fact that they came out of Australia and that they have probably hideously low budgets.
Yeah. And they're also based on nature, which seems like is that a theme, I guess, in Aussie exploitation films, Andrew?
Yeah, I think with these 2 films, and I could probably muster up a handful of other ones. I think in a few of these Australian movies, there's kind of a theme of, well, with these, there's natural horror, the idea of kind of environmental horror, and I think that's sort of specific to Australia in the sense of how hostile, how much of the environment here is. There's some ridiculous percentage of the country, like, 70 or 80% is uninhabitable, basically.
Wow.
Actually?
That's crazy.
I didn't know that.
If you look at any given map and check out how much of the country is actually being lived in, the whole middle part is very, very few people. Generally people tend to sort of stick around the coast, up the top and way over at the sides.
Interesting.
But yeah, there's the whole chunk in the middle that is just like all desert or all really, really dry bush. Yeah, it's the kind of place that if you go for a bushwalk and just kind of wander off the track and get yourself a bit lost, you're probably not coming back.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah.
Well, so, I can see where that subconscious anxiety might come from then.
Yeah, and I mean, you especially see that in Long Weekend.
Yeah, there's sort of a rippling
it's almost like the forest
psychology.
Talks to him and screams at him, yeah.
So that's the theme that you've selected in particular for your films. So what films did you bring to us?
So I've brought to you Colin Eggleston's 1978 film Long Weekend, which is about a couple who seem to be having a bad time in their marriage. And they decide to go away for the weekend, get away from it altogether. And
presumably over a long weekend.
Yep, over a long weekend. And and they commit sort of increasingly gross acts against nature, and nature starts responding in kind, basically. And the second movie is Russell Mulcahy's 1984 film Razorback, which I think if people are going to have heard of either of these films, they'll probably have heard of Razorback, which, I don't know, I guess you could kind of describe as like Jaws in the Outback with a giant pig instead of a shark.
Okay.
Which is a perfect translation, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
I think there was actually a review that they said it was like Jaws with a wiggly tail. Or something like that.
There you go. There you go. So that is about a gigantic razorback wild boar terrorizing an outback town in a very remote rural community. It's a bit of an overlap with the giant monster kind of territory then.
Right.
Yeah, which would have been huge coming after Jaws.
Yeah.
If there's any kind of movie you want to emulate, it's one that is a giant smash at the box office and didn't cost a whole lot to make.
Yep, definitely.
Yep.
All right. Well, this sounds like it's going to be a good time, and I say that we just dive right into it. What do you say?
Long weekend then?
Long weekend.
Prepare yourself for the fright of your life.
Christ!
Long weekend. An experience in terror and suspense.
All right, so we're talking Long Weekend, directed by Colin Eggleston.
Yep.
This movie, as Andrew explained a little bit earlier, is about a couple, Peter and Marcia, who go along with their dog Cricket on a weekend-long camping trip to try to rekindle their marriage and get over some parts in their life that will maybe come to fruition later in the film.
Yes.
And as they're doing so, they have no awareness for nature, and they disrespect it constantly, and nature kind of responds back quite violently.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, it's
loudly.
it's a pretty simple premise, and I was quite surprised because the poster has him, pointing his gun. I was kind of expecting a gun-toting exploitation bonanza. And
I was
the
expecting
actual
a lot more violence.
Yeah, the actual result's more of a slow burn character piece with a bit moodier, a bit slower.
Yeah.
But it really does work for the movie. What did you think, Andrew?
I thought it was interesting. I thought, particularly towards the end, quite wild tonal shifts in terms of it seems like they sort of put a lot of their energy into really building like a sort of foreboding, threatening atmosphere. I spent a lot of the movie just feeling like, oh God, something really terrible's about to happen,
Yeah. No, and even from like the opening images where they're showing you just like, I don't know, there's some sort of animal climbing a rock is the opening shot. It's a crab. That's what it is. Yeah.
I thought it kind of represented the nature at peace too. Before they arrived.
Yeah, but it's got kind of like this weird like droning soundtrack to it, and then eventually into a more of a wailing sound as it goes on.
The score starts with just two notes, just going back and forth basically, and then as the movie comes to fruition, the score expands with the film, and it worked really well.
Yeah, and the opening images in the city as well before they head out on their camping trip are kind of like the shots from Rosemary's Baby, where they're kind of looking at the skyline like that, where there's just there's something here. There's not actually that many people. It's just him jumping into his car and being like, all right, the work day is done. Yeah. I'm going to do something. And just the actual tone is very upsetting for what we're watching.
Like a couple of subtle bits right at the start there where he comes out of his it looks like he comes out of his office, he's wearing his suit.
Yeah.
Seems to be, I don't know, I guess like he's being very familiar with like a pretty young woman that he's talking to on the street.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah.
He is carrying a package, which we find out pretty shortly after that to be a rifle, which it looks like he's just bought in the city. He jumps into his convertible and immediately pulls off a parking ticket that's stuck to the windshield and just kind of balls it up and throws it away. He just pulls off a little thing that's stuck to the front of his windshield, which looks like a parking ticket, and just kind of disregards it. Which and then he fires up his car and revs it up, and then
and this is all in that slow high angle pan, right? Where it's looking like we're observing from above him, like he's like an animal.
Exactly.
And he revs up his car, and it immediately switches to a shot of like a bunch of birds being scared away by the noise of his car.
Yeah, that does happen.
Yeah, and I took that right at the very start to even be like, all right, this guy, he doesn't really care about the rules.
No,
doesn't really care about the laws.
He's in his own world. He's gonna do what he wants.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
He peels off in his car and immediately starts driving like a total arsehole and honking at people and cutting people off in traffic and stuff. And I thought, they've done a good job in a very, very short amount of time here of establishing, all right, this dude doesn't particularly care for the laws of man, and now he's about to take a trip out into nature.
Yeah, and so obviously he's not going to care about that either.
No.
I mean, if he doesn't even care about his own civilization, he's not going to give a shit about the manatee.
Yeah, and he goes home to his wife right after that, and his wife's she's like working with some plants in the bathtub, and she's watching the TV where there's some sort of news report about eagles attacking people.
Yeah. Well, she's soaking their ferns in the tub because they're going away for the long weekend, and she doesn't want them to get too dried out while they're away. I would assume ferns are like a very moisture-hungry rainforest plants that were very, very trendy in the 70s to have in your house.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
But yeah, I like that as well. I like that bit of sort of background foreshadowing of the news report about like something weird and unusual happening with animals somewhere, and she just kind of walks past and switches it off halfway through.
Yeah, sets the tone right away.
I always enjoy, like, when that sort of stuff is well done, I always really enjoy, like, just the subtle background signs that something's not quite right, that the main characters are ignoring.
Yeah, there's a very, like, subtly satisfying cause and effect to that, right? This movie does a lot of that in its filmmaking later on, where it sets up an element kind of just in the foreground or, maybe off in the background, and then later it comes to fruition and you kind of feel some sort of, there's a trigger in your brain that goes, oh yeah, that's why that was there.
Yeah.
But when he goes home, immediately you can already tell that she's not into this trip.
No, not at all. And she and it seems like she really hates that dog. Like, it seems like that's almost taken a toll on their relationship itself before they even go on the trip.
They seem like they do not like each other at all.
Yeah, there's like no chemistry at first. You feel like they just hate each other. It's
crazy. like it's interesting that we come into this relationship like already at a stage where it's in turmoil.
Yeah. You can tell that they've already had this tension between them for a long time.
Yeah. I also think it's worth noting that before he even speaks to her when he comes home, he pulls up the drive too fast and bumps into his own four-wheel drive with his car. Still driving like a dick.
Even in his own driveway.
And then, and he jumps out and takes
the modern man, right?
Yeah. He takes the package out of his car and unwraps it and pulls out this rifle. His wife doesn't know that he's home yet. She's come out onto the balcony, and the first thing he does with this rifle is point it at his own wife.
Yeah, that tells you everything.
Yeah, and you get the shot that's obviously like through the viewfinder,
through
right?
The scope.
Yeah, through the scope.
You get it all. Yeah,
yeah, and you're like, this is a really weird fixation that
very
this guy
specific,
has. Yeah.
Well, you're kind of expecting her to turn and go, "Oh, geez, what are you doing?" and for him to laugh it off or something, but she doesn't notice him and walks back inside. So you just have this weird moment where he knows that he's like pointed this weapon at his own wife's face and just watched her through it before she walks back inside. Which again, it's just that disregard for safety and any kind of consideration that he seems to be showing really quickly.
It's
into the
clearly
movie.
coming from like his own, like it's almost like not even like a conscious thing. Like he's just almost expressing how he's feeling, and his feelings are very telling towards the way that he's treating the things around him.
He even does it later on the beach when she's looking over and he's kind of frustrated with her, and behind her back he starts like doing punching gestures. But then right after that he holds her and goes, "I love you," or something like that. Like this guy is so conflicted. Like he's just he I don't know. It's like it almost like he's convincing himself that he needs to like keep the relationship going, but either of them don't seem like they want it.
Well, yeah, there's kind of like this weird. I mean, I think this is why this movie really works too. Is that the writing for the central relationship really does, because this obviously, compared to other exploitation films that were coming out at the time, especially, like, this isn't particularly action thrilling. It's not gory. It's a lot more psychological, almost mystical in how it treats some of its subject matter.
Very subtle.
And one of our patrons, actually, Kai, he wrote about this movie, and in his, he brought up, by making the couple at its center dangerously codependent, yet ragingly vindictive, the horrors nature brings upon them feel combustible and spontaneous, like an echo of their inner lives rather than just a contrived spiritual force. And I think that he's like 100% on the money with that, because what you get right here is you get very clearly signifiers that this is an unhealthy, unnatural, pretty much doomed relationship from the beginning.
Yeah, that was very much the sense that I got, not just in the practical sense of people thinking that they can solve their extremely broken relationships with a weekend away or trying to have another baby or something like that, Yeah. People go, "Oh, our marriage is falling apart. We better have another child," or like they're just trying to go all in on it, kind of thing. When it's clear that it's, like you said, that it's doomed. And there is a real sense in this film that that the entire thing is destined for failure, that the wheels are coming off, and that they're just really trying in vain to hold it together.
Yeah, in the same way that you get signifiers that their relationship is not really working, and the way that they're so easy to snap at each other over a petty thing, or the way that they're going to dismiss things that maybe are more serious, like her concerns and things like that. And it reflects the same cause and effect filmmaking that this thing has in general, the structure of it, where he puts the harpoon down, and all of a sudden you have a sign there, should that harpoon be there? And within 5 minutes it goes off right in front of her face. Yeah. So, and because the director obviously lets you in on these things so early in advance, and lets you in on the tone so early in advance, like as again, you mentioned that you're waiting for something bad to happen, and that kind of feels like what the movie wants you to experience. So the whole thing kind of becomes this slow motion disintegration of this relationship, and obviously of their own bodies, and then you're just waiting for it to explode. And that's exactly where the film ends up going in its final minutes.
Yeah, I also find it interesting that he's the first one that hears that. I guess it might be just internal, like inside their own heads, the nature, getting at them. But he hears that voice, that scream or whatever, and then when she later tells him, he just denies it and acts like he didn't hear it. He was the first one to hear it when they arrived, and it's like he just refuses to acknowledge it, which is interesting as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he just doesn't want to validate something that she's saying.
Right, exactly. It almost seems like he's doing it just out of spite, even though he knows that he should be concerned. He got the exact same evidence that she does. Yeah. And it's just, it's bizarre. Like, he'd rather almost sacrifice his own safety than just say that she's correct, which is pretty bad.
Not a sign of a lasting relationship.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Just as another Ozploitation factoid. So the lead actor in this, John Hargreaves, he was in some other stuff that was... he was in like a handful of Australian movies that were pretty notable. There's one called Don's Party that was based on a very famous play here, like a famous Australian play. That's just like a one night play, which is about like a house party that a guy is making his wife throw against her wishes, much like this character. and all their friends come around, and it's on election night, so they're watching election night coverage in the 70s, and it just over the course of the evening unveils all these like class conflicts and people's different voting intentions and relationship problems, and winds up in all this conflict. But also he was in 1986's Malcolm, which is a much better known sort of weird Ozploitation movie, where he plays the titular character. But he was also in 1976's Mad Dog Morgan, which is from the period. Yeah, so it's like from the period in around the 70s where they were doing like a lot of bushranger movies about like, there was a movie about Ned Kelly where Mick Jagger played Ned Kelly in the 70s.
I would love to see that. Yeah. Oh, that'd be great.
Well, this one, Mad Dog Morgan, was the true story of Irish outlaw Daniel Morgan, who was wanted dead or alive in Australia during the 1850s. And for some reason, they got this bushranger to be played by Dennis Hopper.
So really if you like it would work.
Yeah. So if you can imagine Dennis Hopper in 1976 with a great big Amish beard playing an Australian outback bushranger, then check that one out if that's your very
specific niche. Yeah.
That's great.
Someone out there just got real excited.
Just
Two
one
people.
person. Yeah. So, like, I liked this actor who played the lead because
I thought honestly that they were both really excellent, and I mean they have to be to both sell.
Yeah, they carry the whole film. So.
Yeah, there's like other than the conversations that they have, there's no dialogue in the movie. There's one truck stop section, and then that's it. Around the time that one of them pieces out in the last like 25 or 30 minutes, there's just no more talking for the rest of the movie.
Yeah. He's going through psychological torment basically.
Yeah, so they both these actors kind of have a lot to sell, and what's interesting is that you really do know, and we've established this, that this relationship isn't going to work. But there's a few really nice moments where like you're almost convinced that like, hey, if you just stop being assholes to each other,
if you just
second,
sit down and communicate for 5 minutes instead of trying to one up each other.
Seems like there's something nice there. You can see what they're trying to save for like 5 seconds before they get into another
before they
fight
just
about
snap
something,
over the smallest little thing. Like he jumps to go fuck yourself, like like no tomorrow.
Yeah. And they're so focused on each other. Obviously, they don't see the nature stuff that's coming for them, which is, I guess, the big thing that we haven't got to just yet.
They see the hints, but they just kind of ignore it because they're so clouded with their own relationship.
Which is just, it really is expert filmmaking to make, a blade of grass menacing.
Yeah. That ending shot where it's just like the little, I don't know what it is exactly, but it seems like just like pollen or something. And it's just like with the synth. And like,
or the way that like
how am I scared of this?
He'll have the camera like sitting behind just in the trees somewhere, just kind of watching them.
Oh yeah, over the camp, that nice that nice shot.
And just the way that he includes them in the edges of the frame.
Or whatever. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because there were a few shots in there that basically looked like a Friday the 13th, Jason's perspective from the woods.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, like that kind of slasher POV stuff that like Halloween
like
and whatnot.
In the first Halloween movie where you would get the shots from Michael's perspective of him watching Laurie, and then it would pull away behind a bush as she turns around.
Right.
There were shots like that in this of where something's peering at them through the grass, and as they turn towards it, it kind of ducks down a bit.
Yeah.
But it never kind of pays off in a specific way, which I would say as well. Like, so where we're up to, they've got together at home. They're going away for the weekend. The wife has made clear that she would rather not be doing it. She's not really interested in camping. She doesn't seem like she's keen to do this at all. But he basically strong arms her into it, which is, a pretty clear indicator of what's to come in terms of their relationship. A vast majority of it is him exercising power over her and pushing her to do things she doesn't want to do. So they start traveling to this coastal area that they're going to. They're driving along at night. He's already started committing shitty acts against nature on the drive there. He flicks his lit cigarette out the window and starts a grass fire.
Yeah, does he? And he hits a
It's that
kangaroo.
kangaroo.
Yeah.
Which they really emphasize on it too. Like they don't just show the kangaroo getting hit. They do, but then they show the body just
they show
getting
the
mangled
roadkill,
by
yeah.
like the rest of it.
Yeah.
They show like they show like the next vehicle running over it too. I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and it's full on. Like it looks real too. It's pretty weird to watch.
Yeah, I found out that is a real kangaroo.
Holy hell!
And that it was.
I was going to say that would not surprise me.
Yeah, they had already. It had already died, and they found it elsewhere. So
Holy
they
shit.
actually like.
Well, yeah, it looked real. I gotta say.
They drove it in from wherever it got hit elsewhere, and then ran over it again. So
that's crazy. Does that happen a lot? Like back, like,
it
with
wouldn't be
Australia
hard to
specifically,
find.
or is it like did films back then do that more so?
I'm honestly not sure. I have a
Because
feeling
it seems like
people
some
wouldn't get
people
away
would
with
be
that
like,
anymore.
yeah, that's what I mean. I don't feel like anyone would be able to get away with that now.
But
at least
you
in the
can-
West.
Yeah, you can tell in the camera though. You're watching it, and you're like, because
Well, that's when I watched it. I was like, "This is that real?" Like I wasn't sure, but that's crazy.
Yeah, well, trust me when I say it would be extremely easy to find an already dead kangaroo by the side of the road somewhere.
Oh
kinda
yeah, it
depressing.
happens a lot.
Any,
It's like deer
oh,
here,
hell yeah.
basically.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, any long distance drive, particularly at night, like through the bush and stuff, you're going to get a lot of them. Even suburbs in the city where I live, if you're sort of on the outskirts of town and it's really like dry in summertime, you get a ton of kangaroos coming down from the hills to like eat the grass on people's lawns because they water it, you know?
Okay.
So yeah, there'll be streets like out near where my parents live and stuff where if during the sort of height of summer, if we're coming home from their place at night, you have to drive like extremely slowly because the streets will just be full of them. You got to wait for them to get out of the way.
Wow.
We've had one like just hop into the side of the car before.
That's crazy. So are they aggressive too? Is it like?
No, like generally speaking, if you like walk over to a kangaroo, they'll just hop away from you. They'll just keep distance and
They won't
and
do
you
the
have,
giant kick to the chest or anything.
you have absolutely no chance of catching a kangaroo that doesn't want to be caught.
Gotcha.
They move at a crazy speed. I would have thought that the only time that a kangaroo would get into it with you is if you like went up to a very large male one and started hitting it, basically.
Yeah.
As you can find extremely weird cooked people doing on videos and shit like that on the internet. I don't understand
Amazing.
why.
Maybe those like back end Aussie people that were in the Razorback or whatever.
Yeah.
Those guys are
Yeah.
the ones doing it.
So yeah, they have the running over the kangaroo part, and it's obviously affecting to him. He he clearly
it seems like the first time he was awakened to anything other than himself in his
Yeah.
surroundings.
Yeah. That's the one time he seems remorseful for what he's done there. The one time.
Yeah.
It's very subtle though. He kind of moves on very
Yeah.
quickly, but
well he seems a little shaken by it, but he also doesn't tell his wife about it. When she wakes up, he just doesn't tell her about it.
Yeah, because again,
immediately.
he's ignoring the signals too, right? That's the idea. Because that was
Yeah.
what you were saying
Yeah.
before too. That he hears the noise first, and he just doesn't.
But he's just like-
like he wants this trip to work, and he's going to
Yeah.
make sure that it works no matter what's getting in his way.
even if it means manipulating
Because
everything.
even as the
involved.
bigger signifiers keep coming along that nature doesn't want them there, he keeps it like everything's fine until like he literally gets attacked by an eagle.
yeah.
It's not even then. It's when the possum attacks him that he's finally like, okay, let's go home.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It takes
'cause
two
I'm not
animals.
having a
He
good
takes
time.
it quite.
Yeah.
He takes a lot. Like the harpoon going off, the eagle, the manatee moving closer, even though it's dead.
Yeah.
Like he's just like, it's fine, and then possum happens, and no, it's game over after that.
So they do have the moment on the way there where they stop at a gas station, and he fills up the car. He goes inside to pick up a slab of beer. They just stopped at this roadside pub, and he goes up and picks up a slab of beer. And the guy behind the bar asks him where they're going, and he says, "Oh, we're just going to." I forget the name of the place now, like
It's like
Munara
Moon-
Beach or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moon something.
Yeah.
Beach, and the guy goes, "Where's that?" And he says,
Well, I hope it's like 5
it's
miles
just
from
5
here now.
miles
Yeah.
down the road. Right?
Yeah.
And the locals all say to him, "Never heard of it. Never heard of it. It's nothing like that around here." And he looks genuinely kind of alarmed, like he doesn't know if they're messing with him or if they're serious or if he's totally lost or anything. And he seems quite taken aback. And he goes and gets into the car. And again, he doesn't tell his wife that these guys have said, you're in the wrong place.
Something weird as fuck, yeah.
We're taking this trip. I don't care, yeah.
Yeah, and then that gets literalized, right, when he's driving on the path there. And then he realizes that like the path doesn't actually go anywhere, that he's just driving on an endless loop of this path.
Yeah.
Well,
did you think that gets a theory that it's kind of like this whole thing was a psychological trip in a way? Because I mean, they say those locals who would know the area straight up say this place doesn't exist.
It seems, I think,
and no one else is around.
It's more likely that nature is like manipulating the physical reality.
Right. Maybe like their own, their perception, basically.
There was the shot as they're leaving the pub where he's messing around with something to do with the truck, and his wife sits up and looks over at the pub, and a couple of the locals have come like right up to the glass door, like the glass window in the door.
And they're just like
and they are staring at her. They are burning holes through the car with their eyes. And it zooms right up on one of the guys who is staring at them, and then sort of crossfades to the headlights of the truck replacing this guy's eyes. And I took that immediately to mean, so these dudes are going to follow them and harass them, or they're going to do the local hillbillies harassing the out-of-towners kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it just
exploitation.
That never pays off at all. Yeah, that just that never comes to anything, which is kind of that's how I felt about the like slasher point of view shots, where I was like, so is someone watching them? Is someone going to pop out? And it just there are these different elements of things that get introduced and just kind of don't pay off at any point.
Yeah, I think the idea is just to create kind of like this larger paranoia, and it's almost like a show of force.
It's almost like why they don't answer
nature's
those
part.
questions, just to keep you paranoid that whole time, maybe.
It is a menacing vibe. All the way.
It's very stressful watching it actually, because especially with the sound design that they have going on there. And
high synths and like
it's like mixing these wailing synths with like this
with the nature screens
with the
themselves.
actual sound design itself, and the obviously the nature sound effects. So like the birds squawking. There's this really ominous one where she's spraying the ants, and it's an extreme close up of the ants, and yet you hear like birds screaming, and then the second she stops spraying, it goes away.
Yeah.
And I was just like, are we meant to believe that the
ants are screaming out of death? Like, that's pretty metal.
Oh, no, I took that to be there's like a lot of moments like that where they commit their various acts against nature, and as soon as they're doing something, as soon as they start committing one of those acts, you can hear birds screaming and animals howling and stuff in the forest. And it's very much just like nature howling in pain as soon as they're doing one of these, yet another one of these horrible acts.
Oh yeah, it's just like a very realistic version, or I guess more like a psychologically realistic version of Hitchcock's The Birds.
Yeah, especially that scene where she's just going through in the truck and they're just hitting the windshield. Yeah, reminiscent of the photo booth or the phone booth, rather.
Yeah, so I guess we should get to the climax, because the climax is the whole time it's building. Where it's obviously we've talked about it already, but it's this very like psychologically stressful, very moody paranoia tone going on the entire time, and it's building towards nature finally swallowing this doomed couple. Yeah. And she parts ways with the vehicle because she's finally like, fuck it. I think he's off looking for the dog. Yeah. Is that the dog's gone missing, and she's
she
like,
even lies and says that the dog's dead and I buried it this morning. And like she hates cricket. Yeah.
Yeah, so by the time they're getting to that point, she has already been expressing in no uncertain terms the entire time that they've been there, I don't like it here and I want to go. Yeah. I want to leave. Like, she's very clearly picking up the sort of menacing air, even though she does have her own complicit part in the crimes against
like
nature.
The eggs, like the egg thrown and stuff like that.
Yeah, she's nuking the ants with poison, and she's like just spraying insecticide everywhere. She's stealing eagle eggs,
and then chucking them at trees.
Well, that was another moment where the second that egg hits the tree and smashes, all the birds start screaming again.
Yeah.
a lot of those very obvious audio cues. But
Yeah,
she's
it ends up being a visual metaphor for the idea that it's revealed partway through where she's just recently had an abortion with and it was possibly his friend's child.
Yeah, that really opened up a whole can of worms in that the truck scene.
Again, this relationship was doomed from the very beginning.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, it's clear that they're not getting along at all, but it also becomes clear that they're having intimacy issues. They haven't had sex for a long time, and she doesn't want to, and he's like, "Well, why not? Why aren't you getting into it?" You know, and then at the height of them fighting, she reveals she throws out at him, "Well, I didn't want to get an abortion," and
he says
that
he doesn't
really
either, right? Or he didn't want her to get it either.
Yeah, he immediately turns around, and it seems again
be
to
spiteful, though.
really fit. Well, yeah, it really fits the theme of both him forcing her to do things that she doesn't want to do,
right?
And also the number of times that even though there will be something that possibly while he's by himself, he's not with her, and he's expressed some sentiment or a fear or wanting to get out of there. And as soon as she says, "I want to leave," he's like, "Oh, can't have any fun."
Yeah, it's almost that win-lose thing again. They view it as like a competition, like all the time, including who leaves first. And as soon as that happened, he was like, "Oh well, fuck," like.
Yeah, and she finally decides that enough is enough. She's gonna drive away at night. Terrible idea, probably. I mean, it doesn't seem like they were getting away either way. But then she starts getting pelted by all of these birds, and she ends up in a spider web, and she's running around, and then we lose track of her for a little while when we focus on him, and he's gone and like
she gets out of the car and runs off, doesn't she?
And then we don't see her for a bit while he is just in like full caveman mode, where he's just like he's been reduced to like his most primal self. 100% nothing but paranoia going through his brain. He hears all these sounds around him, and he's got his gun out, and he's just firing at everything.
Yeah, literally. At one point, he just starts firing randomly in all directions.
So I wanted to ask you guys. I noticed that before you said there's even kind of a mystical sense about some of this, and I thought it was interesting at the very start when they're driving to get there, and like you said, he's coming down this back road. It's not like there's signs pointing the way, but he just keeps driving and driving and driving, and they're just not there, even though it's only supposed to be a couple of miles away. Yeah. To the point where they wind up having to stop and sleep in the car for the night because they just don't know where they are. The next morning, they find out that they're right next to the beach. He's set up camp and everything. But Marcia comes back and says, that sign that we went past ages and ages and ages ago, just, pointing to a left turn, it's just 100 meters away. How could that be? How could we have gone in circles or whatever? And he's like, oh, we didn't. We're here. We made it here. And I got a real vibe from that point on, almost reminiscent of the original Blair Witch Project, where there's that kind of sense of, that sense that once they're in this place, they're not getting out. That very horror movie kind of sense of you've kind of fallen into this place that's like a bit of a limbo.
And it's almost like nature has control of the maze. Is that they're going to guide you where you want you to go based on the paths that you think are there, and that's also what happens, because it happens obviously on their way in when they're doing laps that shouldn't exist, and then it happens again when she's trying to get away through the forest and she can't seem to get anywhere, and that's where she decides to kind of off-road a little bit, and it doesn't really work out.
Well, that was freaking me out at that point when she was driving through and the trees were just getting closer and closer together as she's driving along, and I was like, no, you're not getting out.
And this is how what happens in the finale here is that he's sitting there, he's at the campsite, he's paranoid as hell, he's shooting anything and everything, and somehow she runs all the way back to the camp, even though she was going in the complete opposite direction of the camp, and he fires the harpoon and gets her right in the neck. And one of the it's a great moment, obviously, and one of my favorite things is his performance right when it happens, because he, like the audience in in a way. He's not even, he doesn't even seem surprised.
Looks defeated.
Yeah, he seems very calm about it. He's just very like, that makes sense.
Yeah, like this is what it was leading to.
This is what was going to happen.
Yeah, like did you think anything else was going to happen after this relationship?
And he just retires for the night. He's just like, well, yeah, there's nothing else I can do about this. I'm going to wait till morning.
Yeah.
And then we get a brief 5-minute sequence where he gets up in the morning and he, I guess, finds the energy to get moving again, covers her up, takes the Jeep, starts driving away, and eventually he obviously trashes the Jeep, gets it stuck in the mud. Mm-hmm. And it leads to a great ending.
Amazing.
Yeah,
really wraps up the whole film. I didn't really get it until that point.
Well, because he's running and he's looking for to hitchhike on a big transport truck that's coming through, and I think it's the truck driver that he sees at the one that's glaring at him in the bar. I think it's the same dude.
It might be. Yeah.
And the eagle comes through his window, attacks the
Eagle's
driver.
like, no, you're
he
killing
can't
this
see
dude.
shit, and he just nails Peter, runs him over. There's this huge trail of blood.
Crazy, yeah.
And
See,
you're like, this is the
ending was
only way
bizarre.
that this could have ended. You're
Yeah.
just like, this is where this relationship was going.
They make you like emphasize roadkill. like you're like you almost you like start to. I thought about the kangaroo right away instead of him actually. Like as soon as it happened,
Yeah.
I was like, oh shit! Like it just all came together. That ending is
nature
amazing.
all of a sudden gets its big got him.
Yeah, exactly. Like I thought it was a great ending.
I thought it was very funny because like that whole sequence leading up to that where so Marcia had been trying to get out in the truck and she had to abandon it and she gets shot. He takes the truck and does the same, where he's effectively just done the same thing as her, which is he's just trying to drive out by just going as far as he can in any one direction. He's not getting anywhere. He's getting stuck in the trees, stuck in the mud. He gets out and he just starts running. He's already used up all the rounds in the rifle by firing off blindly into the night.
Yeah, and the harpoon is sitting in his wife's neck.
Yep.
He's got nothing
and he's
left.
He's running, just more and more frantic. Like he's at the point of just being in an absolute fearful panic. And there's the sound of just more and more animals getting closer and closer just off screen. And that whole sequence to me was very reminiscent of like, the shots in the Evil Dead movies where
Yes.
people are running away
sure.
from like the force coming for them from off screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that really gave me a big sense of that sort of thing where he was being chased by just a mass of things just off screen. And he's not doing any thinking at this stage. He is just in a blind panic, stumbling and falling and running as fast as he can just to get away. And so when he just finally pops out on the road at the end, to me, it didn't look like he even tried to flag down the truck. He just pops out and sees it. And then it's not an eagle, it's a cockatoo.
Oh, it's a cockatoo.
Yeah, so which are not known for like attacking people or anything like that, which is why it looked particularly funny for a cockatoo to just dive bomb through this dude's window and start flapping around in his face. And so it's a very sudden, very violent sort of punctuation, this guy's death at the end of the movie. But I couldn't help but take a certain sense of like they had this whole thing mapped out about they'll have their crimes against nature, and nature will retaliate, and they'd kind of built right up to this big crescendo, and then they were like, we got to kill him. We'll hit him with a truck. But what if a bird distracts the driver, and then we can say nature did it?
Yeah.
I was very much expecting him to get like mauled by a pack of animals. It's also worth noting when he's running away, he trips and falls, and there's a snake right in his face. Which looks like it's going to bite him right in the face. So for international viewers, I'm pretty sure that was a brown snake, which is one of the most venomous snakes in Australia.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah, it doesn't look like much. It doesn't look like a king cobra or a diamondback or something like that. But those are the ones
deadly.
that where like you're done. You're done very quickly if you get bitten by one of them.
Before we wrap it up, just because you were speaking about the ending and how the cockatoo ended up going in, and that's what caused the truck driver to do what he did. Apparently, the original ending was supposed to be more forgiving towards Peter, and the animals were supposed to give him a second chance, apparently. But the sequence was too complicated to film, so they switched it and did this. And he said that it was he actually poetically he said he wanted another man to kill him instead of the cockatoo that came in and did it. He wanted him to kind of walk out onto the thing, the truck driver is being negligent like he was to the kangaroo, and then he just gets hit. But I guess they switched it because it was too difficult to film, or they wanted nature to be the winner at the end.
That makes a lot more sense with the shot of the snake that he was talking about, where one of the deadliest snakes just looks at him instead of attacking him, where all the other animals have been attacking him up until that point. Anyway, that's Long Weekend.
Yeah. Get down to the old rating.
This is the part of the show where we get into the reductive rating round, where we erase all the words and all the nuance that we just talked about for 30 minutes, and we reduce the movie to
to a number
between 1 and 5, or I guess a 0. We haven't given a 0 yet, but
I don't think I've ever given a 0.
But this for me was a pretty easy 4 out of 5.
Yeah, 4 out of 5 for me
you?
too.
How about you, Andrew?
Oh, I didn't know if it was too mean to give it a 3.
No, I don't think so.
I'd like to know your reasons, just for fun.
Purely because it kind of seemed like it seemed like the guts of a better movie that someone had to shoehorn into kind of being an exploitation piece. You know what I mean? Like,
okay.
It was like this guy had been green lit to make a sort of horror movie or a schlock movie or whatever, but he had grander ambitions. You know, he wanted it to really be a character study, and I think a lot of that came off really well in terms of the relationship between the leads, the main performances, a lot of the soundtrack stuff, all that sense of foreboding and everything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just when it came to the kind of
like the actual violence itself and stuff.
Yeah, when it came to the big payoffs and everything, it just seemed to me to be a really wild tonal shift between, you know, this thing is almost like an indie relationship thriller in that kind of like like Dead Calm, that kind of movie.
Yeah. No, I'm actually pretty sure this film made the rounds at some film festivals. So like it's not as trashy as some of the stuff that we've talked about. I do think it's got some grander ambitions.
Yeah, it kind of flip-flopped a little too wildly from like serious ambitions to real schlocky kind of payoffs and deaths and stuff. But no, I was going to ask if you guys do half stars, half points.
If you want to do one, you can do one, but we don't do them.
Yeah, I just don't. Right. But
so you're gonna go to a 3.5? Is that what you were thinking?
I was. I'll take a 3 though. I'll take a 3. Okay. I do think it was definitely very good. A very good performance from the lead actor, particularly because I just spent like 2/3 of the movie yelling, "This guy's such a piece of shit. He needs to die. He needs to die." Which is exactly what you want, I guess, in that sort of character, and it's done in a much better way than, say, films like anything by Eli Roth, like Hostel or whatever, where he just goes, "Oh, you'll want to see this character die if I write them as just a completely unlikable turd."
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so that's
you can still see humanity in the other guy in Long Weekend.
All right, so that was Long Weekend. Now we're gonna jump into the second film, Razorback.
God has created it, and hell has given it a name. Now there's a new breed of terror. Razorback.
All right, so we are talking Razorback, the Russell Mulcahy. I don't. It's fine.
What was it again, Andrew?
Yeah,
that sounds right to me. Russell Mulcahy.
There we go.
Russell Mulcahy film about a vicious wild boar, Razorback boar, that is terrorizing communities, I guess, on the edges of the Australian outback or in the Australian outback, just in general.
No, this looks like it's very much outback, which which I should just note, I think is an interesting distinction from the last film, Long Weekend, because a lot of these films about a lot of films where the sort of environment features as a bit of an antagonist, like Razorback or say Wolf Creek.
Oh yeah, I know the Wolf Creek ones.
So there's that sense in the film of people being trapped in a location because you are somewhere so isolated and remote, and if you, like I said, if you just start running off, you're probably going to die out in the desert. Whereas Long Weekend was the sort of exception to that, in that they're like right on the coast. They're right next to the ocean, just down by the beach and stuff. So that was kind of the exception to that rule. Whereas this is right out in the outback. This is proper remote. This movie.
Nice. Well, this has an insane opening sequence.
I loved it. I love this opening
Absolutely.
so much.
Well, I mean, straight off the bat, it's immediately really colorful and vivid and saturated and everything. So I think it's worth noting just about the background of Russell Mulcahy, who is from Melbourne in Australia. He got his start doing music videos. So he did music videos for Duran Duran, Ultravox, Billy Joel, Spandau Ballet, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I actually read that he got offered this movie because of the video that he directed for Duran Duran, The Hungry Like the Wolf.
Oh,
yeah, there you go.
Have you seen the video? Is it based in nature and everything like
that?
Oh,
I haven't seen it, but I imagine. I just read that. I was just like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
It must be visually kind of what they were hoping for.
Yeah.
But yeah, immediately you got like these deep oranges going on. And one thing that's awesome is it's the grandpa putting his grandson to bed, and there's just this slight rustling that starts happening. And he becomes aware of it. And the next thing is just this huge, tight close-up of him cocking his rifle. And I was just like, well, yeah, we're in the outback.
Yeah, he's ready to go. Little slight noise, and he's just...
Yeah. Like, I would have, like, just looked around and been like, oh, okay, it's fine.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, he's pulling a rifle out,
Cocks it, too.
Yeah, and the next thing is a giant razorback boar, or you don't really quite see it. You see edges of it.
Yeah.
Just rips through his
entire house.
like it's a goddamn rhino.
From side to side.
Yeah.
Just,
it looks like someone
crib.
driving a bulldozer straight through a house, isn't it? It just crashes straight through room to room.
And then for some reason the house is on fire. I was like, wait, what?
And it cuts. It's like a hard cut. Yep. And he's just like... flames everywhere, Razorback. Like, oh man, it's unbelievable. But it really sets the tone of like the energy of the film, right away. Yeah. And it even has that it's his first one out of many in the movie where he gets on his knees and he screams out into the wilderness and the reverb goes on and like
and then the title appears and the image goes into the title. Like this is straight up music video filmmaking off the bat.
It was great.
Oh yeah, man! It's a very interesting movie to look at. It's all really, really vivid color and lighting.
Yeah.
Like everything in every nighttime shot is backlit by a massive floodlight.
Yeah.
A lot of the imagery I thought was very reminiscent of the movie that most people would know Russell Mulcahy for, which is Highlander.
Right.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that at some point.
The old Christopher Lambert, Sean Connery movie. He did also direct Highlander 2, The Quickening, which is a massive hot mess of a film.
I recently watched a video. I think that's one of those. Flicks did one on that movie.
Yeah, I think that's one of those movies with a reputation as having been filmed and either being incomprehensible in its original form or having been retooled so extensively by the studio that it just completely stops making sense.
Yeah, I heard they actually have two versions.
He did also make a movie called... there is some kind of like... there is a director's cut, but trust me, it's not a lot better. He also directed a movie called Ricochet, which is Denzel Washington as a former cop and now district attorney who's being absolutely terrorized by a psychotic John Lithgow, who's someone Lithgow. That he put away, coming after him for revenge.
Back in the day,
from Third Rock from the Sun and shit.
Yeah, well, no, he did a lot of killer stuff back in the day because he did De Palma's Blowout, where he was like the killer going after, just the serial killer going after people.
Yeah.
He also did, Oh, what's the other one by De Palma? Dressed to Kill, I think.
I haven't seen that.
He did Raising Cain.
Raising Cain, yes, he did that one too.
Yeah, that's the other De Palma one, which is absolutely off the wall.
Yeah,
that
we
film.
haven't done a De Palma movie yet, but we're going to be doing a lot of him eventually.
Oh man, yeah, that one takes a twist very early into the film of John Lithgow playing a killer with multiple personalities, and he plays all of them, and it's wild stuff. But Mulcahy also did what I think is a very underrated superhero movie, which was the 1994 or 97 or something adaptation of The Shadow with Alec Baldwin.
Oh, I don't think I've seen that.
Yeah, it's based on like one of those old 30s comic books called The Shadow.
Cool.
Yeah, it's got Alec Baldwin. It's also got Tim Curry really chewing the scenery, and Ian McKellen, Penelope Ann Miller. I really like that movie. I think it's very underrated as a superhero movie from before the modern superhero boom. I rate that one highly.
Sure.
So
yeah, so this guy's made a lot of he's made a lot of genre film, and I'm assuming a lot of stylish genre film based on seeing this and The Highlander.
Yeah, 100%.
Because this one in particular, it's very he's got a lot of influences for this one. Because it's got kind of like that Halloween Carpenter synth to it, of course, and obviously he literally hired the cinematographer, George Miller, cinematographer for The Road Warrior. So
this movie actually won an award for cinematography.
Well, it's gorgeous.
Oh yeah,
like,
it is. It's almost
you look at
odd how gorgeous it is for the film.
It's funny because the deep blues and oranges that you see in the film during the daylight scenes would eventually George Miller wasn't even doing color that much in his Mad Max films. He was doing it, but not to that extreme. And then when he came back and did Fury Road, not just a couple of years ago, those deep oranges and blues were maybe the highlight of that film.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think there was some influence too? Like we'll get into it a bit more, but the two Hicks who have the truck. It's very Mad Max reminiscent. Even their goggles, they kind of have like a look to them of that.
This was only a couple years after The Road Warrior came out, like 2 or 3 years. So after that being a hit, this was definitely trying to do a little bit of the way I kind of saw it was that it was trying to get a little bit of Mad Max in there.
Yeah, definitely.
It was trying to get a little bit of Jaws in there, obviously in the premise.
Yeah.
And then it was trying to do a little bit of Tobe Hooper, Texas Chainsaw stuff, obviously.
Okay,
when you're seeing, you got where you get that kind of Hicksploitation stuff happening, and you obviously there's also
a grossness to
there's
the
a
people
gross
sometimes,
raw grit that you get to it, especially when it gets to the scenes in the meat industry stuff.
Yep. Yeah,
which
the
is
pet food cannery. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what sets the film in motion is this idea that obviously I guess in this place they kill a lot of wild animals, and the opening scene tells you exactly why they kill a lot of animals in their particular community. But the main character, and I was a little surprised by this, ends up being not because she's a news reporter and like an animal rights activist who's come into the community to kind of maybe expose some of the things that they're doing, but she immediately becomes the boar's like second victim of the film. And it ends up being her husband is the main character. I was really perplexed when like 30 minutes in the girl wasn't the main character anymore.
I was too. It really takes a turn.
Well, it kind of has a bit of a vibe similar to some of the like Friday the 13th movies and that sort of stuff where you'll have some teens, turn up at the place and go through the whole motions and all get killed off by the slasher, and then they'll give you the title card and then start with like the actual cast now that they've told you what to expect to happen.
Very true. Very true.
To them. So they do have that big kind of switch. Just regarding that actress who plays the reporter, because it all starts off really remote outback kind of stuff, and then immediately transports us to New York City, where there is this reporter talking to her husband about finally being green lit to go to Australia and do this story about the slaughter of kangaroos. And the second, I'm curious about whether or not you guys thought anything of this. The second she started talking, I went, oh well, that's not right.
Actually,
And,
I didn't. I until I looked up that she was Australian. I totally just I didn't think she wasn't at all. I thought she was American. But that
As soon
could
as
be
she
because I wasn't paying
started talking,
attention.
As soon as she started talking, I just went, "Oh well, there's no way she's American." And I was almost relieved when she was killed off so early into the film because I was
So you
like,
didn't have to
"Good,
do it for the whole-
I couldn't have dealt with that voice for the whole movie."
No,
Just,
I didn't pick up. I didn't
That's
pick up
funny
on that.
that
at all.
we didn't.
But
pick
see,
up
but
on
see,
it's our accent.
Well, no, because the first thing though that did occur to me was that I didn't realize they were in New York, so I thought she was
Oh.
supposed to be Australian, and I was like, oh, she doesn't have that much of an accent. Was my
Oh,
first
okay,
thought.
okay.
So it was
Oh, it's
actually
an
the
American pretending to be an Australian.
That's great.
But I thought that scene was really funny when she's looking at, or the husband is watching her most recent thing where she's doing animal rights thing at like in the American South or something like
yeah,
that.
he's just
And
like,
the dude's like,
"Fuck off."
yo, fuck off. Yeah, get out of here. And then
He's like,
I was like,
"What?
most
You kill
vulgar
flies?
interview.
There's no difference there. Fuck
Like,
off."
like, yeah, right, that they would air that interview.
real.
She
They,
came
like-
off so badly.
And he just straight up says like "fuck yourself" and then walks away.
Yeah.
Like 6 o'clock news for sure.
Yeah. But she heads over to Australia, and again, she's looking to or at least expose the animal industries over in Australia, where they're killing lots of kangaroos. Is the thing that they're doing?
Yeah, I think those are
that's
the
the
bodies that are
suggestion.
hanging in the meat shop. Or
Yeah,
whatever.
but
Yeah, it's worth noting that number one, like you can go to the grocery store and buy kangaroo to eat like it was a steak.
Okay.
Number two, kangaroos as pet food is a super common thing even now. And number three, on farms, kangaroos are like essentially treated as pests in Australia.
So like deer and like rats and like that kind of thing. That I guess.
Yeah, for real.
Wow.
In the same way that in the States, like hunters would need to keep down the populations of like deers and wolves
Right.
and stuff around like farming properties.
right. So the idea
just-
that she's outraged by kangaroos is a very American issue,
Yeah.
not an
yeah,
Australian.
yeah, it's like
It's funny. She's like gonna crack this case where nothing's like. It's like, yeah, we all do this. What are you talking about? Yeah.
yeah, like roo shooting and pig hunting are extremely normal things here. And yeah, like
Okay,
if you-
is it normal though? Because this immediately stuck out to me because she eventually goes obviously to these outback towns where they do a lot of hunting and they do a lot of these kinds of things, and she I think she calls them like the intestine or the gut of Australia because they deal with all these meats and they turn them into product. But there's a dude who walks through the first town that she's in, and he's riding on a camel, and we were. As Canadian, I was like, I've never seen someone ride a camel like a horse, other than in like obviously these movies where they're in like the
Mummy.
like the full out desert. And the dude's got like a boombox on the camel, and
Yeah.
I've never seen that. Now is that a thing?
That is. Yeah, is that a thing?
Australia has the largest wild camel population in the world.
Oh,
So are camels like actually like horses for you guys?
No, camels are more like pests as well. Like there's
Oh,
just
really?
there's just like huge herds of wild camels just tooling around out in the middle of the country, and they can't get rid of them.
do people ride them?
Yeah, definitely. There's like camel racing and stuff way out in the outback.
Crazy.
But yeah, it's a leftover from when they were like building railroads across the middle of the country, like 100 years ago or whatever. And so they bought a whole bunch of camels over because they were like, these are good things for helping us do stuff in the desert. And when they were finished, they just went, we'll just cut all these loose and they'll just run off. And instead, a whole bunch
You made a
of
huge
camels.
population of them.
Yeah.
Yep. They just accidentally produced a massive population of wild camels that now just come through and like clean out, all the vegetation in areas and stuff like that. And
Just great things.
yeah, so that's why there's camels out there.
Yeah, and so this movie comes from the point of view, or at least from this lady. She's an animal rights activist. And obviously she's also a city folk. So this merges kind of like the Ozploitation and the Hicksploitation, where she's coming into kind of like a bit of a bumpkin town where the main industry that they have there is obviously these animals that they hunt, which is similar to Texas Chainsaw, and just that's kind of what the family there gets into, is the slaughter industry starts for them being kind of obviously automated, so they don't need these guys anymore. So they start, finding their own way to use their own skills in the slaughter industry. These guys seem very much in the thick of their industry.
Yeah.
Because there's a giant boar who is just like, is he supposed to be really intelligent? He's like,
seems like he's controlling the other boars and like.
Yeah. There's a very weird implication with this boar, and obviously this girl comes in, she doesn't know anything that she's talking about, and all these people they haven't seen the boar in a while, and the old grandpa is now, like a lone drifter cowboy type situation, just
out for his vendetta.
He's gonna get vengeance on this boar.
It's worth mentioning actually that the house gets destroyed right at the start. His grandson gets killed, and he's then brought before court and charged with like murder or manslaughter of the child.
Yes.
And they wind up saying, oh, well, we don't have enough evidence to prove that it was you. So basically, his house and grandchild have been wiped out by this massive beast from the outback. No one believes him. And he's still on a mission, a couple of years later to prove that it's real and to bring it down.
Yeah, and it finally comes out again when this lady is just nonchalantly driving through the outback, treating it like it's an American road where she can just kind of go and do as she pleases.
Yep.
And she gets some footage of the local psychopath slaughter workers. And
in their factory.
Yeah, and she films their kind of grotesque factory situation there, and then she starts driving away from them. And then they catch her, and we get kind of like what looks like a bit of like a Mad Max chase. This very harsh lighting.
Oh yeah.
Their
the
truck
really
is outfitted. It's
got like metal grates on it and spikes on the front. And
because it's their like a portable meat rack is the idea.
Yeah.
And they start using it to take her down, and they attack her and they assault her.
Attempt to rape her.
And
so
then the
not
boar.
Good people.
No, absolutely insane mates.
It gets to the hills have eyes kind of angle at that point,
sure.
and you think that they are going to be assaulting her and everything, but suddenly they hear a noise.
Yeah, and the boar comes.
The boar
hear a
saves the
large
day.
noise.
Yeah,
the Razorback is like, I'm gonna kill babies, but I don't like women being raped, and I'm gonna stop.
Well, see, what's funny is that's your immediate reaction. Is you're like, oh, she's being saved by the boar, and then 30 seconds later, the boar is eating her.
Just to throw this in there, it's reminiscent of actually remember I was telling you Friday the 13th Part 8 when he goes to Manhattan. And Jason saves a girl from rape and then kills her right after. And I was like, I immediately thought of that with the Razorback moment here.
Oh man,
I'm like, there's some good in them. They're just killing machines.
I definitely got like at points of this, I got a vibe of like the Nightmare on Elm Street movies where there's just that really stylized, really heightened sense of reality. A lot of that kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially in the end.
And I think that the
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say I think the practical effects in this movie are great.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think
they actually spent $250,000 on the mechanical boar.
Yeah,
but I think they do well in terms of like not showing you too much of the boar too quickly. They do a lot of keeping it out of sight. So I think they do really well at like particularly the scenes that are set at nighttime, like this one where the American reporter, the rednecks have been scared off, or bogans as we would call them here.
Bogans.
They get scared off by the giant boar. Bogans.
Bogan. Okay.
That is that's like our version of hillbillies or rednecks or whatever.
Cool.
yeah, so they've been scared off, and she's just alone by herself in her car and trying to get herself together.
Yeah, and the way that it cuts that action at night when she gets attacked, it's like a close up of the boar's like grotesque mouth drooling and ripping through the thing, and then blood just sprays like the inside of the windshield, and then and then a close up of her screaming face, and then some neat trickery with the boar hanging out of the car that it's halfway into, and like
then I'm pretty sure you start hearing like a crunch almost.
Yeah,
she's being pulled away.
Yeah, and the way that it's lit is obviously
it's quite prolonged, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, it's pretty out there. Yeah.
Yeah, and
they really kind of. It doesn't just sweep in and take her. It like she's desperately trying to hang on to the car as it starts with her legs.
Yeah.
And keeps going.
The sounds made me visualize like it, like almost like an anaconda just eating her as it went. Like it was. I might be mistaken, but I thought I was hearing like crunching sounds and shit. I was like, damn.
No, the huge style and the huge sound design. Were really beneficial to this movie, because I think it's lacking in some of the obviously the character writing in a way that Long Weekend wasn't.
Yeah, it's a bit predictable on those in that regard. Like,
but it makes up for it in some of the way that it some of its images and some of its editing, especially when the two you called them bogans when eventually the husband makes his way over to Australia in search of his wife. And he teams up with the Bogans to take him out into the outback safely and help him figure this out, and they strand him out there. And he kind of has like a day and a half long journey,
like
where,
psychedelic trip,
and it's this weird like abstract
Morrison
fever dream, where he there's these images of the dead desert that you see, and it's almost like Jodorowsky.
Yeah,
and
I felt like the Doors should start playing.
Yeah, and it's wild. And I actually
before that point when they do strand him out there, because he I think they shoot a kangaroo or he shoots a kangaroo or something. They've got him operating the spotlight on top of the truck while they shoot a kangaroo, and he realizes it isn't dead, and they say, "Oh, well, finish it off. That's what you got to do," which, in fairness, is how it works. And he can't bring himself to do it. He throws up, and these roo shooters are disgusted by him. And they say, "You just stay here." They throw him like a kangaroo skin to wrap himself up in, because he's out in the middle of the desert at night.
Yeah.
And they just bail out and leave him there and say, "Oh, we'll be back in 5 or 6 hours."
5 or 6 hours.
Yeah, and I love when he climbs the post. He climbs the post to like sleep, and he wakes up in the morning and all these pigs are like around it and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
That was my favorite sequence actually, was the sequence where he gets stranded in the desert, because it's it actually did also remind me of The Hills Have Eyes, but the climax of The Hills Have Eyes, where the family finally decides that it has to like get savage in order to get out of this situation alive. That is kind of his
transformation to badass, you know what I mean? Like he finally gets to the farm, he faints, and then from there it seems like he's really focused on.
But the way that they depict the outback here is almost expressionistic in the way that it's visualized and stuff like that, which is obviously it's a big difference from Long Weekend, which takes more of a realist approach.
But with this one, I think what really helped lend to that was, particularly in the nighttime scenes, was the way a lot of it was lit, where it was all very kind of starkly lit from behind. So you got this really high contrast between any of the sort of objects
they got those fog
in his
machines
immediate
going
vicinity. Yeah, and so anything that's sort of outside of the immediate vicinity of where he is and what he can see is just black. You can't see anything out beyond where he is. And I think they did a really good job with that of, again, bringing in that sort of Australian element of the environment is really hostile. You're not supposed to be here. If you get stuck somewhere, if you get lost, you're probably going to die. There's also that whole aspect as well, and this is where I really felt it started to get that Jaws influence, was him being marooned in the pitch black middle of the night out in the Australian outback by himself, and he's a foreigner too. He's got no clue where he is. the threat is just out of sight. You know, even when he starts to hear the giant pig. You know, like it's very much kind of the land-based equivalent of being stuck in the middle of the ocean and knowing that there's sharks swimming around you. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to hide or anything like that. You are just completely marooned. And he, at that point where he hears something, this is after he's been, after he's fallen asleep cradling the dead kangaroo for the warmth from its body. Yeah, and he gets woken up by the sound of something crashing around in the bush. And he freaks out and gets up and starts to run. And again, that really gave me that Evil Dead being chased by something that's just out of screen, you know, just off camera.
Yeah, absolutely.
This massive, scary threat. And like you said, then he just winds up having this huge hallucinogenic trip through the middle of the desert.
Yeah, it's
wild.
almost sci-fi. Like it's so odd.
It's especially compared to the rest of the film. That scene was so left field. It works really well.
Yeah,
but it surprised me.
Yeah,
it really did.
Apparently the director actually received a call from Steven Spielberg asking him about how he actually did some of those effects during the desert scene.
Because like the use of the matte paintings.
Because I'm guessing they said this
awesome.
is like Jaws. Watch it, and he was like, okay.
Like there's one sequence where there's like jagged trees and stuff, and like it's really well done. Like that's how they do it, right? Matte paintings or something like that.
Yeah, that's how they do that.
It's very cool, and it works with the style.
I have the big crack through the middle of the
and I love when he finally gets out of the desert and he reaches he reaches a house, and it ends up being the house of the daughter of, or the granddaughter of the daughter of the hunter. Or something.
I think I don't know if they're actually related. I thought she was a hired person that she just works for him.
Was it the daughter, Andrew?
I think earlier on in the film there was some sort of interaction with the mother of his grandson, like during the court case, and it wasn't the same woman.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not totally sure, but she definitely works with him or something like that.
I just remember a scene where she mentioned something about getting paid, like she's being paid for something, and because he asks why she's even here or something like that.
Yeah, well, either way, he shows up to this house, and there's a cute blonde girl at the house, and she saves him and all of this, and then he wakes up. And he's looking at the back of her head, and all of a sudden she turns around and she's got the big old boar face on her for like 2 seconds.
Yeah, that actually got me.
That got me. Yeah, I jumped a little bit at that one.
Really made me think of the similar sort of sequence in American Werewolf in London.
Yes.
Where he's like having his nightmares after being attacked by the werewolf, and he's being looked after by a nurse who swivels around, and suddenly she's all wolf faced. Or the other scenes where the kind of wolf-faced Nazis pile into the room and start stabbing everybody. But yeah, just that sudden moment of like, unreality just before he wakes up. Did anyone else get a vibe from the lead actor where like he kind of reminded me of Glenn Howerton from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
Oh, I haven't seen
like,
that.
He kind of
is that a
he had a bit of Dennis face.
Yeah, Dennis. Oh, for sure, dude. 100%. He totally had a Dennis face. It would have been great if he added a little bit of that character into the movie.
Yeah, so the rest of the movie kind of becomes the husband looking for his wife, but it's really confusing because then he seems attracted to the blonde girl and he kind of forgets about his wife, so it just becomes getting vengeance on the boar. Yeah,
it almost seems like the movie just felt like it needed that, I guess, that relationship of some kind.
It was an excuse to get the husband over there. Was the idea, and then it's all of a sudden he's got to get revenge on the boar, and he's got to take out the Hicks, and that's kind of what the rest of the movie. And then just
forget my wife. This girl's got gorgeous blue eyes.
Yeah, and then the grandpa hunter is obviously still trying to get vengeance as well.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen the Steven Seagal film Hard to Kill?
No. Is she in it?
It's a schlocky classic. It's one of my absolute favorite Steven Seagal movies. His character, the excellently named Mason Storm, has like he's got himself some incriminating evidence about a senator, and he hides it, and then he gets attacked in his home by like the mafia or whatever, and they kill his wife and son, and he gets shot up a bunch too, goes to hospital, and he goes into a coma. And so another cop, a friend of his, hides him away, and he is in the LA Coma Center for 7 years, while Kelly LeBrock from Weird Science looks after him. And then he finally wakes up and he sets about on his journey of revenge. And of course, like within, a week of waking up, he's fucking Kelly LeBrock. And I'm just like, dude, as far as you're concerned, your wife died a week ago. Like, you just woke up. You just woke up. You're still in the middle of like training yourself to take revenge on the people who killed your wife, and you're banging this lady. It doesn't make a huge amount of sense. That's what I was immediately struck by that in this movie when he gets dropped off by the girl somewhere, and they give each other a nice kiss, and I'm like, aren't you still looking for your dead wife?
Yeah, like it seemed like the psychological trip just changed his entire mentality. There's like that trip in the desert changed me, man. I don't need my wife anymore. I just
I just need to kill this boar.
That's right. I'm a part of Australia.
And there's a great moment where the hunter, the grandpa hunter, is observing the boar and his whole flock of piglets, and they're all chilling there. And the second he's doing that thing where he's looking through the binoculars and the camera's following his view through it, and then he catches a glimpse of it, and it does that big old Jaws dolly zoom shot where he's like, the boar, and he starts firing at it, and it's the way that this is cut and the way that it's edited, it's very clearly by a guy who does music videos, because the visual, this could almost be a silent movie in the way that it's done with visual storytelling.
There really isn't much like important dialogue. You know? Like it's really it really could be done visually in a minimal.
And what happens after that?
There's some great visuals in this movie, like there's a character who, like, he never gets any dialogue or anything like that, but a guy who's just been setting up, like, traps outside of his house. He sets up, like, a big one of those, bear trap kind of things with a net over it, which is chained up to, like, the corner of his house. And he goes inside and watches TV. And at some point, we hear a whole bunch of noise outside, and then there's a great deal of rumbling. And the trap has obviously latched onto the giant boar, which runs off with it and literally tears off the entire corner of his house, which has the TV in it that he's watching.
Oh, dude,
I
runs off with it into the night.
Yeah, I loved the part where the whole corner of the house is being pulled away, and yet the TV is still on.
Yeah,
and he's like, and the TV doesn't go out for like at least a mile away.
It just gets out. Just before the house disappears into darkness. But yeah, there's a lot of the practical effects in this movie are really good. Like just the boar running through the house at the start. The even just a lot of the sets, like the whole pet food cannery set is just like a big gory nightmare, all crazily lit, again very much like a music video. It's got stark, intense lighting.
Yeah, it's got like a really deep blue to it, and obviously the fog machines are going on in there too, and they got but then there's the actual meat grinder itself, which is like this huge red.
Yeah, just a red light that comes out
and that's where the climactic showdown happens between obviously the husband and the boar, and the hicks as well, because the boar gets the hicks there. But I loved the bit where he's trying to coax the boar, because this is where you've seen him. He's transitioned into like a hunter at this point.
Yeah.
And he's trying to coax the boar into getting onto the conveyor belt to go into the meat grinder. And he's just like, kiss my ass.
Yeah,
he's like, Yeah, and it's cutting really, really fast between like a close-up of the boar and then a shot of him and then this extreme close-up of the meat grinder, and the colors are switching so much and the lighting is switching so much that it kind of creates this weird, again, it's like a weird fever dream effect where you're kind of like you can't really connect the actual geography because you can't see it, but you understand exactly what's happening.
Yeah. There's something about that fight between the lead and the Razorback too. Is when he stabs the Razorback initially, the Razorback seems to pull that Uruk-hai move from Fellowship of the Ring where he pulls it in closer to him and it's just like, bro, you think you're gonna do this? I was like, are you telling me right now that the Razorback is literally taunting him at this point? Like it was pretty funny. I don't know if that was intentional, but that's actually the vibe that I got. Because it seemed like the Razorback was just pulling into it, you know?
Jets of blood shooting out onto him.
Yeah. On his face and everything, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was like squirting at him.
I think they did a good job, like in that Jaws sort of sense of not ever really exposing too much of the boar.
The editing's
like
done really well.
They definitely had it kind of, they have its face come out, they have it kind of blast through the house and stuff, but you see it in these flashes, you see sections of it, you know. I think they did pretty well with that. I mean, I could definitely think of movies that I've seen in the past, like do you remember that movie Jeepers Creepers with like Justin Long in it?
Yeah, I do remember that.
My distinct memory of that movie is really enjoying the first half of it, where they had this thing kind of stalking this school bus full of kids, you know, a lot of like lore building sort of stuff, really great atmosphere building. And then about halfway through, they just got this big monster thing just standing out in the daylight. And then you're seeing way too much of him for all the rest of the movie.
Right.
Yeah, and I think if you're talking, are you talking about the second one with the bus? Because like they even at a point they have close-ups of his face and whole body. Like they don't even try to be subtle about it eventually. And I feel like this movie did a good job of editing it minimally to make you almost think bigger of the Razorback.
Yeah, and it keeps that Jaws vibe going as well of like this thing could just kind of come out of nowhere and snatch you at any moment, as opposed to it just being in the room with you. So yeah, even all the shots like it just blasting in through the window of the pet food place towards the end. But yes, good climax.
Yeah, great climax. But I was gonna say I really loved the line when the Hicks are talking to the husband. This is when they like first meet him, and he's like American, and he's like no, Canadian. They're like Canadians are American, ain't they? Or something like
they're American, aren't they?
Yeah, same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, those characters, the sort of, you know, hillbilly pet food characters, they
almost seem really
I definitely got the vibe that he was. Yeah, well, he was going for like obviously the Texas Chainsaw Massacre family kind of thing. Yeah. Even though there were only a couple of them and they weren't like related or anything like that, but I think they were the only characters where like everybody else in the movie when they were talking, like the people at the pub and all the people in the outback town and stuff. I made a note of the fact that like they're depicting really rural areas, but almost everybody's accents were what I would consider like relatively cosmopolitan, as in like not really broad, not really over the top, you know, like the difference between, you know, the accent of someone from like New York versus someone from South Carolina kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, they all seemed like really quite neutral accents to me, other than the two pet food guys. And I did wonder whether or not you guys would like need some subtitles for some of the stuff
I was literally going to say that. I was gonna watch it with subtitles.
Well, they were
there was a point
sort
where
of
the
rambling.
slang, the slang at a certain point, it was like it felt like they improvise it. Like it's not even words. It was just rapid fire words that I've never heard before. And I was gonna actually watch it with subtitles, but my download didn't allow that.
Well, there was some interesting little notes. Like there was a moment with one of the two slaughterhouse guys where they had a shot that panned up from his feet to his head, and he was wearing like football socks from the rugby league team from the city I live in, which was very funny to me, like seeing the retro 80s footy socks on that guy.
Yeah.
Nice.
And also when the husband got there and they immediately offered him a drink of rum, they said, do you want a rum or something? Mm-hmm. And like, that's an extremely outback drink. That's a very like North Queensland kind of drink. That is the spirit of choice for like all pig hunting type dudes.
Nice.
But yeah, there were lots of little funny touches.
Anyway, we're going to enter the reductive rating round on Razorback.
Good.
Andrew, what does Razorback get from you?
Ooh, I really enjoyed this one. Really vivid imagery, really cool stuff. I'm gonna go a 4 purely because I think it really would have been elevated by like some slightly more interesting performances or characters. But like we said, everything interesting was basically like the visuals, the sound, the lighting, the practical effects, all that sort of stuff. It was just a bit unfortunate that the characters inside of that weren't terribly interesting in and of themselves.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go a 4.
I'm going to give it a 4 as well, and I'm going to basically go for the same thing. I just think that this movie is very incredibly directed and very, very stylish. And, you know, a dude who's trying to mix George Miller and Spielberg and Hooper all together, I got to give him credit because he really does get the vibe of all of them and combines them in a way that is unique. Yeah, it's probably this and the Road Warrior got to be probably two of the best Ozploitation stuff that I've seen.
Yeah,
Jane?
Yeah. I am gonna give it a 3. It's a strong 3. I gotta say, it almost got the 4 for me. It's like visually, I loved it. You know, synth, absolutely loved. Even some small character moments, like, you know, when he would do the vendetta scream and things like that. It's just certain things fell apart for me, I guess, with mostly the script. I mean, I felt it was very predictable. I felt like the lead character kind of lost his way. Like, I don't know what, like, you know, what we were discussing with him.
I'm still a little confused to how I was supposed to feel when he finishes off the boar and he gets the girl hanging off the meat hook, and then he's just like, freeze frame.
So I was like, oh, okay. It felt more like they just needed that conventional ending. And another thing that I felt, maybe they just did it on purpose, but I don't like how the old guy went out. I felt like he could have went out a little tougher, you know, a little stronger. The whole time he's got this like, oh, I'm gonna get this motherfucker, and then when it comes time that he is about to die from it, he kind of seems afraid. And I felt like it would have been more true to his character if he was just like, bring it the fuck on, Razorback, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, it is. Well,
yeah, he's meant to be like the old captain from Jaws.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I wanted. I wanted that. I wanted that ending where he just was like, fuck it, and you know, just gave it his all, whether it meant his death or not. So there were just some shortcomings for me.
It definitely was a little odd that they ended up giving the husband the big vengeance kill when the grandpa is the big opening, and you're like, damn, give it to him.
That's what I was mostly invested in, was the grandpa, when it came to at least the vendetta towards the Razorback. So it just came up short a little bit for me, but it's a strong 3 for sure.
Yeah, so that was Razorback and Long Weekend. That's going to be it for this week's episode. You want to say something?
Yeah, there was one thing. Apparently, this critic, there was 2 things. One of them said that it was like Jaws with a wiggly tail, but then another one, Anna Marie Deloso, said that this was one of the great Australian embarrassments of the year.
What?
Yeah. That was on the wiki page. I'm like, disagree, Anna. Disagree. There's so much style and fun.
I actually heard that Long Weekend, despite actually being relatively critical acclaimed, did terribly in Australia.
Yeah, I think
so.
Both
Clearly,
of
you
movies,
guys don't like these movies.
Yeah, until years later.
We have a complicated relationship with our own movies.
Yeah, anyway, so that was Long Weekend and Razorback. Andrew, thanks so much for coming on this week. If you've got anything you want to plug, this is the time.
Do it up.
Oh, well, if you are interested in hearing about Australian politics and jokes about that kind of thing, you can check us out at Bunta Vista Socialist Club. Just on Twitter at Bunta Vista. Yeah, and actually there's a couple of episodes that people who like this show might like to dig back and look at. We did one with illustrator and good friend of the show, Eliza Gager, about kind of the parallels between Australian and American cinema and culture. So we do a whole examination of kind of the parallels between, I guess, both the American West and the cowboy legend and everything versus like Australian settlement and bush rangers, and we get into Mad Max and all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, you can dig that one up.
Awesome. Well, for us, obviously, you can find us at on Twitter at @SleazoidsPod, me at the Josh L, Jamie
at Jamie Miller, ACAS, ACAS, all lowercase.
Yeah, and Andrew, where can they find you on Twitter?
They can find me on Twitter at IllyBotion.
Sweet. So anyway, guys, thanks so much for listening. This has been a bit of a longer episode for us.
It was fun, though.
But it was a lot of fun. I'm really glad that you brought these movies, because I otherwise probably wouldn't have checked these ones in particular
Thanks
out.
for coming,
I hadn't heard of either at the time, so it was good to have that. Next week, or not next week, 2 weeks from now, we're going to be talking about the Death Wish films to coincide with the release of...
Are we doing Death Wish and another movie, or is it
No, we're going to be doing Death Wish 1, 2, and 3 as one
we're
giant
doing a
show.
Trilogy, okay.
Yep. And we're...
See, I wasn't even aware of this, folks.
Yep.
Here we go.
To coincide with the release of Eli Roth's poorly timed remake of this particular film. He is going to get eaten alive on principle for the fact of remaking this film.
Yep. Good timing, Eli, as always.
But it's going to be fun. We're going to be talking about all the Death Wish movies. I had only ever seen the first one, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks so much again, guys, for listening. You can find, if you have the time, make sure to give us a rating and a review on iTunes.
And we will read them.
And we will read them out
Even
on the
if they're
show when you guys do that. So if you guys hate the show, definitely review them.
Yeah, because I'd love to read it.
And next month, our next episode is going to be the first week of March. March is when we start our 2 bonus episodes a month. So if you guys subscribe on Patreon, you guys will be getting 2 bonus episodes a month starting next month. Anyway, guys, thanks again so much for listening. Keep it sleazy.
Yeah, keep it sleazy.